It's Tuesday. It's March 18th. Adam Walsh is away, and Andrew will play. I'm Andrew Hawthorne. This is The Signal. We've got the preseason gardening show. This is the spring training of gardening. Well, it's the almost spring training of gardening. So, get that pot of leftover green face paint from St. Patrick's Day and smear it all over your green thumb. Growing season is just around the corner. Honestly, on a day as hot and humid as this, it feels like that corner is getting pretty close too. It is muggy out there. There's something going on. My guest today, Dan Rubin, he is the founding chair of the Food Producers Forum, and he's the author of Sun, Seed, Soil, Tips and Techniques for Northern Garden. Hey, Dan.
Hey, Andrew. It's glad to be here. It's almost that time, isn't it?
It's almost that time. How do you feel this time of year? Are you just ready? Like, yes, let's get back at it.
Yeah, the snow comes and I go, oh, and then it melts off and I go, yeah, and then another cycle. But I've started my seeds in my basement under lights, all kinds of things, cucumbers and tomatoes and lettuce and herbs, and they'll be poking up. I know a lot of people actually have them coming up out of the ground earlier than this, but I'm betting on a kind of a delayed start. So I've just started my first round of about 500 seeds.
Wow. This is the pros. They're already thinking like let's start the seeds. Let's get ready. You want to be ready to hit the ground running when it actually hits, when spring is there. We're days away.
Yeah, that's absolutely one of the keys that I've discovered in 20 years of gardening here is that you need to extend the growing season. I'm doing workshops in April and May about this called Creating the Year-Round Garden coming up. I've got people already signed up for them. And you start your seeds early in the spring, under lights, indoors, in sterilized potting soil so they don't get damping off. And then by the time that it's warm enough outdoors, particularly if you protect the plants with a covering like a cloche or a plastic box or a bell jar or something like that, you can really extend the growing season here by up to 2 months.
Wow, significant.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Dan obviously knows what he's talking about, and we're going to talk a bit about that. But we want to hear your questions as well and comments, and the lines are open. Do you have growing questions? Are your questions growing for the start of the season? We'd love to hear from you. You can call 709-722-7111 or 1-800-563-8255. We'd love to hear from you. But if you would like me to read out your questions and do it in a funny voice or something, we can do that too. 709-327-8206. 709-327-8206. You'll text right to my screen here, and I can read it out for you, and we can discuss it there. You can email too, thesignal@cbc.ca. We got all the weird technological stuff that you can comment on us here. Dan, so you're talking about getting seeds ready. You mentioned a certain type of soil, like special soil?
It's not special. It's just that if you used soil that had been around for a while, it probably would have spores in it for mold, for fungi. And when those spores interact with the young plant coming up, you can get an attack on the plant because it's very young, and you get what's called damping off, which is like a wilting, a drooping over of the plant, and then it dies. So the way you prevent that is by using soil basically that's been baked to kill those spores.
Is that still good? That doesn't harm the nutrients in the soil?
No, it really doesn't. It just sterilizes the mold spores. And so most commercial potting soils for starting seeds are good for that. I do caution people, I have this right in print in my book, not to buy sacks of black earth or any of those bagged soils from the big box stores because they've been reportedly failing lately. And that's because there's no regulation of what's in them.
Oh, no.
It could be any old crap. But when it comes to potting soil, I do use the commercial brands. I buy it by the bale, and it's sterilized.
Oh, excellent. So you were mentioning a few of the different kinds of seeds that you're starting already. How do you decide what kinds of seeds to get to this early in the season?
You look at the things that are more cold tolerant or the ones that need a longer run to get started. So that's why it's a combination of things like lettuce and arugula and spinach and chard, which are cold season crops. They even germinate in lower temperatures in the soil, with plants that need a longer run to be ready, like tomatoes or cucumbers or peppers. But there will be others that I'll start later on that need a shorter run. You figure that you're about 4 weeks away from planting out, 3 to 4 weeks, when you put the seeds in the soil to sprout.
So that's right now, like 3 or 4 weeks away.
Yeah, it is for me because my garden has enclosed spaces. I have a small greenhouse, but when I plant out into raised beds, the raised beds have coverings of rime, of woven fabric, or plastic over them, or hoops, or our little kind of mini greenhouses, so that allows me to plant earlier than in an open garden. And I live in a windy, cold place right by the ocean.
Is it Newfoundland?
Yeah, it's Pooch Cove. But I've learned these techniques over the years to extend the growing season. So protecting plants is one, and starting seeds early is another strategy.
It's interesting because, there's been so much talk about food sustainability and growing so much of our own food here. And I think because, most of our topsoil is the Grand Banks. It got scraped off by all these glaciers. It's not really the first thing that we think of doing around here. But like you say, there are different techniques that we can be using in this climate, in this place, to be able to do that.
Well, you mentioned that I helped start this group that I'm now part of and a project leader for Food Producers Forum. We're a 6-year-old provincial nonprofit. Many of your listeners will already have heard this story. And I've learned so much in the last 6 years. I'm holding in my hand a copy of the survey report from the survey that we did in 2022 called WTF, Where's the Food? And we launched it online in that fall, and we ran it for 4 months, and we got 742 surveys back from 167 communities. And those 742 growers documented their production in 2022 of 6.2 million pounds of food.
Wow.
Most of which was commercially grown, but about 441,000 pounds was grown by the 650 home gardeners or collected by foragers, hunters, fishers. So
440,000 pounds from 650 home gardeners.
That's correct.
Wow.
That's our statistic, or one of our statistics. So the report gives all kinds of data. You can find this on our website, Food Producers Forum, FORUM.com. It's right on the main page, the link to the Where's the Food survey report. And we learned so much from it about how it's being grown, what's being grown. We know the exact number of pounds, or approximate number of pounds, of broccoli that were grown. Do you know that 2% of what was being produced that year was grapes?
Grapes?
Yeah.
Does that mean we could have our own wine going on in larger quantities? Or
in my little lot by the sea in Pooch Cove, I grow grapes and kiwis and black currants and red currants and apples and pears and peaches and cherries and plums. And last year I made 240 bottles of wine from my own fruit.
All right.
Yeah. So yes, we can.
So there's very little in the way then.
There's
things.
A huge myth. Like, folks listening, please tell your friends who say, oh, you can't grow anything here, that they are dead wrong. That's a myth, and a pernicious myth, a damaging myth, to say that people in outports used to always grow their food by the hundreds of pounds. Pooch Cove used to ship food grown in Pooch Cove into St. John's by the truckload, by the hundreds of pounds.
If only it was still like that.
Well, it is still like that, but it's flying under the radar. But there is, in the last 6 years, the work that I've done, we've got a network set up right across the province now called the Provincial Food Network. 15 sites where food's being grown and food education is taking place. And the group that we brought together for the project voted in October to become a cooperative and welcome in more farms. We have the potential to grow our own food.
Amazing. If you would like to grow your own food, You can check them at the Food Producers Forum, and you can call us as well. The survey is called Where's the Food WTF. So if you ever catch your kids texting WTF at each other, that's what they're asking. They're talking about this survey.
Yeah, that's what it is.
And,
but let me mention, Andrew, one other thing about our website is that we're building a new website. I was hoping to announce it being launched today. It's got a few more days to work out some quirks with the handheld phone version, but the new survey is coming within the week. And it will be similar to the current website that you'll find at foodproducersforum.com, in that on the current website, you'll see a green band across the screen and a whole bunch of words like cabbage, potatoes. Now you click on those words and you'll be led into an online encyclopedia of gardening that we've spent the last 3 years building. If you want to learn about gardening, come to foodproducersforum.com.
Amazing.
We have the resources.
And you can do a sneak preview of it right now by calling into our show, 722-7111. You can ask Dan a question right now, or 1-800-563-8255. You can also text me here, 709-327-8206. All your gardening questions will be answered in the order in which they arrive. So you may not be able to tell just from looking at me, but I don't know anything about gardening. I'm a beginner. I want to grow things.
I could see that in your eyes.
You can see it, right? I've got, you've got a green thumb
just
over
joking.
there. My thumb is purple. It doesn't work. What do I do? How do I get started with this? I've got all this grass at home.
Well, the main thing that I kind of get across in the workshops that I haven't done since COVID, but I will be doing this April and May, is to convince people that you can grow stuff. And what it's about is just kind of girding your loins and being willing to make mistakes. And when you do that, what you'll find out, as I explain in my garden book, the basics are three things.
Okay.
Healthy soil, healthy organic soil, protection from wind and cold, and plant the right varieties. Not all seeds are equal. There are about 2,500 varieties of named tomatoes listed on the Seeds of Diversity site, which is the Canadian Heritage Seed Organization. So not all of those will do well, but I'll bet one that will do well in Winnipeg, Manitoba, because of the cold, will do well here. So you got to find the right varieties, build your soil fertility with organic materials, and create different forms of protection, raised beds, cloches, coverings that cut the wind and keep the plants warm.
So let's start with the soil. So
sure.
I've got the soil of a man's heart, they say, is stonier, and that's what my lot is like as well. It's just all little pebbles. There's the occasional boulder, possibly.
Yeah.
Jimmy Hoffa's down there somewhere. How do I make that more arable, more useful if I want some nice peaches and strawberries and grapes in the future?
Well, not so much for those perennial fruit crops, but let's focus initially on vegetables. How do I grow vegetables in Pooch Cove? Well, when I arrived, it was traditional in the ground garden. And the wonderful man that I bought the house from, who built the house, Harry Langmead, may he rest in peace, beautiful man, had a traditional garden where he grew potatoes and turnips and carrots and that. But what I have done is build boxes out of wood, out of 2x10 lumber, and fill them selectively with good soil. The first thing I did was to dig out and screen the soil and put the rocks in the paths, and I made gravel paths. So
that's just with the soil on your lot? You're like screening that out and...
Yeah, but that wasn't good enough.
Okay.
To add to that, I got a delivery of triple mix topsoil and compost from Carew Services in Portugal Cove.
Okay.
And I mixed that in.
Supporting local business, very good.
That's right. And then I added some manure, which I sourced locally because I have a neighbor with goats and chickens.
We won't dig into that too much, but I appreciate it.
Maple leaves. And by the way, when you go to the Botanical Garden up on Mount Scio and you see this beautiful black soil, what you're looking at is composted maple leaves.
Of course. Maple leaves specifically.
Specifically, because imagine a maple tree, big, huge maple, and the roots go down wider than the branches, and they bring up all the nutrients that the tree needs. Mm-hmm. And then those go out into the leaves. And in the fall, the tree delivers those leaves to you. Don't bag them up and throw them away.
Don't do that. That's the
Run
soil
your
right
mower
there.
over them, compost them, or just layer them on top of your beds. And the big discovery in gardening these days is no dig. It turns out that when you dig up the soil, and I love to dig my soil, you're evicting the very creatures that live in that soil.
Worms and
bacteria and fungi and nematode worms and all of that process the nutrients to create them ready for the roots of the plants.
Wow. We have a call with a question coming in
Sure.
here. We've got Megan McCarthy calling in. Hello, Megan.
Oh, hi, everybody. How's it going?
It's going swell. Thanks for calling the show, Megan.
Hi, Megan.
Great. Hi, Dan.
What's your question? Oh, she's our guest. Hello, Megan. Oh, I'm so sorry. Of course.
Yeah, that's okay.
I didn't realize it's just here on the call sheet. Megan, of course, Landscape Design for Home Gardens is a 2-part workshop that you're working on covering the what and why of good design. Megan, can you tell us a bit about your workshop?
Wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm from the Botanical Garden, just as the background, I guess. So I'm excited to be, on the show in the future and talk about plants. But we have a lot of awesome workshops coming up at the garden in the next even couple months. So unfortunately, landscape design is full. I was actually just told, but we have a bunch of other workshops coming up. So we have botany for gardeners. So as Dan would probably agree, it's great to know how plants work and all their different parts and how they exist in their environment. So we'll be doing a 2-part workshop on that coming up very soon.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So the bill I've seen is that this is a workshop for a home gardener who wants to design the landscape of their dreams. What kind of things are we going to learn in this workshop?
Yeah, so that design workshop, that's the basics of all, I guess, garden design. So how design incorporates nature and art and functional living space. So that one is actually completely full. So there's no more space on that one. But it is an excellent time for folks if they are sort of looking to reimagine their garden, to sort of think about what works and what doesn't, and bring in some of those elements of art while also maintaining the function. So, that one for everyone signed up, that's going to be great. And for those that didn't quite make it in, we run that workshop every year. So we'll see you next year.
It's coming back?
Yeah, it's coming back. Yeah.
So the other day I was just sitting down thinking, why wasn't I born a hobbit from Lord of the Rings? And thinking, if only I had this little hobbit hole with all these nice little plants. Are you going to help me make that a reality? Can I do that in my backyard?
Oh, of course. Yeah. Hobbit potential is still within us all. And I guess at the end of the day, it's figuring out, what do you want? If being a hobbit is what you want, then, but a lot of people, it's nice to dream big when you're reimagining your garden. So I think Hobbit potential is great. And if that means that you get a root cellar, I'm sure Dan would be very, I think bringing the root cellars back would also be an awesome.
Amazing. I could try that.
Yeah.
Dan, did you have something to add to that?
It's really wonderful. We're definitely in workshop time, aren't we, Megan? Because I have
Totally.
mine coming up and pretty fully enrolled. I've got 2 sessions in April and 2 sessions in May, and I've got about 40 people waiting for their registration form. If that's one of you out there, be patient. I've been so busy, but I'll get those out within a day or two. And then as well as there are other workshops taking place at the Botanical Garden this spring, aren't there?
Yes, for sure. And of course, Dan, I don't know if you talked about CD Saturday, but that is coming up on April 19th. But we still have space in our Growing Fruit in Newfoundland workshop that is happening, and then our Botany for Gardeners, which is a 2-part one that I'm doing as well in April. So yeah, it's a busy time.
Is there a website that the people could go to see information and sign up for these?
Oh, of course, yeah. So mun.ca/botanical garden, you can always find, and that's where you can also find, for example, like summer camp registration is coming up on March 30th for season pass holders and April 2nd for the general public. And we hope to see everybody at CD Saturday. That's going to be lots of workshops there. I think, Dan, both of us will be doing.
You'll both be out there exchanging the seeds. Amazing.
Yeah, CD Saturday is kind of a national tradition. It happens right across the country at this time of year, sometimes earlier in places where things are already blooming, but a little bit later here. April 19th, that's Saturday. It's a full-day event. It's free, and we relaunched this in partnership with the Botanical Garden a few years ago, and it's now sponsored by the Botanical Garden, Food Producers Forum, the Mercy Center, and the Autism Society. And there'll be workshops, there'll be activities for children, but it's this big free swap of seeds and books and tools, and it's just a lovely day. So,
hey, how do people get involved? So, you swap seeds, I know. You come in, if you've got some extra seeds, you bring them in.
You bring them packaged up, and you drop them on the table, and you'll find there's hundreds of different varieties there already. We've gotten great support over the last few years from Holland Nursery. John Frecker on Torbay Road has given us a bunch of seeds that they don't need. And so the seed exchange is the heart of it, but it's also a connecting community space. There'll be tables for the different groups working on food security issues and gardening issues. The Horticultural Society will be there. And then there's these workshops where we pretend to know things, right, Megan?
What are you going to be up to on CD Saturday, Megan?
So I'm going to be doing a gardening 101 workshop, actually. So the very basics, like the 1-hour crash course of, if you're ever curious about gardening and didn't really know where to start, sort of the very, very basics. So that's going to be great. And I'll say, too, about CD Saturday, everything is completely free. And it's very family friendly. The library will be there reading books. It's a great place to, bring your home family and go away with some little plants and some seeds to get you excited about spring, because the garden then opens Thursday, May 1st after that. So if today is any indication, we'll be very ready. And
no kidding.
Hopefully in full swing, full spring, I should say, I guess.
Nice.
Then, yeah.
What can people expect of the garden when it opens? Do you have any fun things planned for the next little while?
Yeah, so over the last year or so, we've been sort of in this reno mode. So we have lots of new plants and new gardens that are sort of in transition, which is always really exciting. So for folks that know the garden really well, there's going to be, some fun changes. And then we have things that, were newly planted a couple years ago that are really going to be coming into full swing, like our rose garden, for example. So we're just really happy to have people back in the garden. We'll be open 5 days a week, 9:30 to 5 o'clock as of May 1st. As always, lots more workshops. I'm doing a pruning workshop in June, and we're doing an edible wild shoots. Edible plants. Yeah.
What wild shoots should I be?
Workshops in May. Yeah, well, come on down to the workshop, and we'll teach you all about the basics of foraging in the spring.
On some shoots. Okay. What's up, Dan?
Yeah. So lots of great education coming your way. Yeah.
I already mentioned that I've got a lot of people already signed up tentatively for my workshops in April and May, but there still is about a dozen places open. So if you're interested in the workshop I call Creating the Year-Round Garden, Strategies for Extending the Growing Season and How to Grow Things in Our Climate, send an email to me, and you can send that email to info, I-N-F-O, at perfectlyperennial.com. No, I'm sorry, perfectlyperennial.ca. So info@perfectlyperennial.ca, and I'll put you on the waiting list, and we'll let you know when there's space open, probably for the May sessions. I also want to mention that there will be other workshops coming up. I know that David Goodyear at the Homestead at Flat Rock is having workshops on pruning, on water harvesting, chicken math. If you don't know what that is, chicken math is you can never have too many chickens. And also on the general theme of sustainability. And David is absolutely wonderful in terms of a person who is really doing it to learn from. Composting, he'll have a composting workshop coming up. So if you check out the Homestead at Flat Rock, you can express interest in his. And finally, at the Mercy Center on Mount Scio Road, 101 Mount Scio Road, which is a beautiful developing community farm site, Sean Dawson, the forager, will be offering workshops on foraging wild plants this spring. And we don't know the dates for those yet, but I'll be meeting with him this Thursday, and we'll be announcing those. So lots of opportunities to learn.
Incredible. There's so many things going on. So yeah, you can learn some foraging. You can learn some chicken math, the square root of roosters. Why not?
That's right.
Megan, is there anything that you wanted to add before we let you go here? How's your prep going in the lead up to spring?
Well, yeah, today is, I did a tiny bit of weeding as I was coming back from a meeting, which is very exciting. Yeah, I mean, now is the time, like if that we can kind of do like the big cleanups, any big branches down and that sort of thing. But I always want to caution people this time of year too, that to remember that the ground is very wet still. So we're very anxious to get in our gardens, but just also be very cautious of like compaction and of little heads and little sprouts that are coming up that in your excitable state might get squished. But yeah, we're really excited for this season, and we're always at this time of year sort of assessing, what came through and what didn't, and where there's damage and where we'll have to do a cleanup. So it's a very exciting time to get back in the garden, and to also remember to not go to full hog, because Sheila's brush is probably coming this week, and not to go full bore, because we do still have probably a bit of winter left.
Oh, this is fool's spring for absolute certainty. This is just lulling us all into a false sense of security.
Wishful thinking.
Absolutely. Megan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. And have a good rest of the garden time.
We'll see you on the 19th.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, it's going to be a great day.
Yep, Megan's got a series of landscape design for home gardens and other amazing programming happening. You can find out about that as well. Starting April 3rd is when part one of that starts as well. Yes, Dan.
So I've also been, through my seed company, Perfectly Perennial Herbs and Seeds, offering landscape design services. And I've been out to maybe 25 homes and farms to do landscape design, and what that really is about is dialogue, collaboration. You ask people, just as you suggested, I want to be in Hobbitville, and then you design, or you help them design the garden to achieve its full potential. And it's such a wonderful process because it's both aesthetic and practical. And a lot of times we don't realize the potential to grow fruit or to grow things that are wild along with the things that we plant ourselves. There's such tremendous healing power in many of the wild plants that we don't even start. They just pop right out of the ground. And one of the things that I've learned from that is that we need to learn something really important, which is that we are not in charge. Okay. And that's the big mistake that our society has made, and why we're in the mess we're in. It's because we think we're the rulers. We think we're in charge, and we're not. We are one small part of the natural system, and we need to be much more respectful and observant. And what I find in my own garden is that the garden is a place of healing and hope as well as food. And I walk around and I go, look at that. Where did that come from? And I'm always observing. I'm always learning. And there is a reassurance that comes with that. There's a feeling of coming home, like Joni Mitchell said. We get ourselves back to the garden. And I know that almost every time I talk to somebody about gardening who is a gardener, that's what we end up talking about, is that feeling that you get when you go out in the spring and things are beginning to come back to life and you realize, here I am, you know?
And here you are. You're listening to The Signal. My name's Andrew Hawthorne. I'm in for Adam Walsh today. And we're talking about gardening, as you may have noticed. Very lovingly and relaxingly talking about gardening. You can join in on that conversation, 722-7111 or 1-800-563-8255. You can also text us at 709-327-8206, or you can send us an email at thesignal@cbc.ca if you have any questions for Dan. Hey, Dan.
So I want to circle back to now that I've been so philosophical, I want to circle back to the practical aspects and talk about the alternative to digging in your garden. And the alternative...
Yeah, you said we don't dig anymore.
Yeah.
Oh,
You don't need to. In fact, it doesn't do good things to the resources that plants need to grow and be healthy, because you need that whole ecosystem that lives in the soil, as we learned just in the last 10 or 15 years, to feed the plants. So what do you do if you don't dig? Well, you layer on top.
You layer the soil
Some
up.
people call it the lasagna method. Ruth Stout, a famous author of a garden book published in the 1960s called Having a Garden Without a Green Thumb Without an Aching Back, something like that. And you get the things like the maple leaves that I mentioned, and manure, and compost, and seaweed, and
okay.
fish waste. And
Are you just picking that up off going to Middle Cove and,
Yep.
and picking it up off
This
the beach
is the
there?
time of year, the spring, when it's washed by the rains and the snow. Bring it home, and you either dig it into the soil, or even better, just layer it on top. Let the wind dry it out. It crumbles into the soil, and all of those nutrients that you layer on the top, they get washed down in to feed the roots. And along the way, the critters that live in the soil, break them down smaller and smaller until they get to the size that's water soluble. This is science, folks. And then once they're water soluble, the fungal threads, the mycorrhizae in the soil, delivers those directly to the roots of the plants. They plug in like a telephone network, and they deliver them, and you get happy plants.
Just from crumbling seaweed on top and letting
And
it
all
just...
those other things, the
all that
maple
stuff,
leaves and
maple
the compost and the manure and the fish waste, if you can get capelin and let it rot down.
Which also may just be free on the beach down there.
Exactly. We have everything we need here. In fact, one of our partners, Nathan Gidge, hi Nathan, hi Samantha, and their son, who live in Gambo, have a farm in a gravel pit, which they selected because they wanted to show that you can build soil. And Nathan has told me, and he's quite sure of this, from a permaculture basis, that all of the resources we need for healthy soil are out there in the forest and in the sea, and we harvest them. They're free, and bring them, put them on top. And they've been growing beautiful commercial crops in a gravel pit in Gambo.
Wow. Just from stuff they've gathered around, just to prove that they can do it. Incredible.
And that's the answer to what you were asking me, to what do you do when your yard is built on top of fill and it's all just gravel. Well, you build a box out of 2x10 lumber, no more than 3 feet wide, so it's easy to work in. And you fill it with compost from karroos and seaweed and maple leaves and manure. And then you plant into that, and oh my God.
It just comes right up.
Especially compost. Compost is wonderful. And we need to be composting at the municipal level.
So we're talking about the soil. We're talking about gardening. Once again, you can call in. I'm just going to keep throwing the numbers out here, but I'm already, I've got enough stuff to fill my own gardening with so far. 722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. Or you could text us if you don't want to come on the air here, and I'll read your question, 709-327-8206. We talked about the soil. Let's get into the fertilizer a little. So you said that you gathered up some manure from your friend who has goats.
Yep. Well-aged manure, mind you.
Well-aged manure.
Yeah, because if it's hot, chicken manure particularly is so rich in nitrogen, it'll burn plants. So it needs to sit for a while or be added to compost to break down.
So if I want to well-age my chicken and goat manure, how will I avoid a lawsuit from my wife?
Well, the trick is to put it as far from the back door as you can, but also put it in a container with a lid on it and let it breathe a bit, but not be too stinky. Another thing you can do, and I do this every time I weed, is the weeds go into a 45-gallon drum of water, and they rot, and oh my God, do they smell bad.
Mixed in with water now, like you're just throwing the weeds right into the water.
Yes, this is water composting, and there's a fellow down the shore in Fairyland, Brian Yeager, the natural gardener, who's been developing and marketing a commercial product he calls his Seaweed Booster, which is kelp sitting in water for 2 years with air bubbling through it. But much quicker than that, when the seaweed or the weeds sit in the big bucket of water, they rot.
Yeah.
And what you end up is with a weed tea that's a concentrate, and you scoop it out and you mix it 1 to 10 with water, and you water with it or spray it on the leaves of your plants.
Weed tea.
Yeah, and the plants start singing Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen.
Okay. And you've shown the weeds. You're like, you're going to attack my plants?
You
Nuts
turn
to
the
you.
weeds.
I'm using your power
that
against you.
Some of those weeds, like chickweed and lamb's quarter and nettles, which we tend to despise because they sting, that's some of the healthiest food around us.
For the plants or for ourselves?
For humans.
Stinger nettles?
Stinger nettles, and you harvest them with gloves because they do sting.
Do you eat them with the gloves? Because how's that going to...
No, you boil them in water, and you make soup or tea with them.
Takes
you
the
make nettle
sting.
tea, and it's
Nettle
a spring
tea,
tonic. Dandelion greens, oh my God.
Dandelion greens are incredible.
Best salad I've ever tasted is my neighbor Elka's mixture of lemon juice and olive oil and salt, sea salt, over fresh dandelion greens in the spring. There is not a better salad.
Okay, well, so what am I going to do with the weeds that I've got, though? Because I have goutweed everywhere.
That's a pain. That's a really tough one. You can choke it out by covering the soil with black landscape fabric, or digging it out, but it's relatively hopeless. But goutweed, Sean Dawson, the forager, will tell you,
relatively
is
hopeless
edible.
Is my middle name. So
it's edible, but no, there's
is
a
it?
real.
Can I eat that stuff too?
Yes, you can. Don't quote me. Go to his book.
I'm going to look that up.
The Forager's Dinner.
Okay.
And there's information there about eating goutweed.
Okay. What do you do? Like, do you have a lot of weeds in your garden? Are you making the weed tea to fertilize with all that?
I don't, because I've been trimming the weeds out of my raised beds year by year. At this time of year, once the raised beds are cleared, they're relatively weed-free. But the reason that the weeds sprout is because you've dug the soil and expose them to the light.
Really? So once again, layer the soil, don't dig the soil.
The solution for weeds is mulching.
It's just mulch those weeds, use landscape fabric for the bad ones, like mine.
Well, if you had to kill goutweed, that's probably what you'd have to do. But other than that, I do not use the landscape fabric. It's noxious. But some, because people, what they do is they bury it under their paths and stuff. And then, oh my God, the work that I've done as a gardener, digging that stuff out, it's terrible. And it's plastic and it degrades. But let me go back to the mulching question. You have so many resources around you for mulching. If you can get your branches chipped up, chips are great. Wood chips feed the soil. grass clippings.
And wood chips look great too. Just to go back to
Oh,
that.
yeah.
You get some nice red ones or brown ones.
Well,
and-
the story about wood chips I learned from a wonderful man who's one of our partners at the Campbellton Berry Farm. And Philip Thornley took me out to where he grows his blackcurrants. And he said, you see the path here has the wood chips in it. I said, yes, Philip. He said, well, look, let's dig this away. And he dug away at the wood chips, and underneath it was like white threads. He said, the wood chips create the perfect environment for the fungal threads that feed my berries. And when I do that, the berries grow twice as tall and produce twice as much fruit.
Can we talk about the fungal threads? You've mentioned this a couple times.
Mycorrhizae, they're called.
So we know mushrooms and fungus, they're connected through this mycelial network underneath the soil. They can tell each other when things are happening and feed each other. But that helps the plants too, not just the fungus?
Oh, absolutely. There's a book by a woman named Simard about her research on fungal threads in forests. But the same thing is true in your garden, that they connect and they actually communicate between the plants. Wow. Electrically and send messages, but they provide nutrients directly to the plants in an exchange where the plants give them back certain nutrients, and they provide the core nutrients of nitrogen and nitrogen-based organic compounds. So this is the edge of new learning going on as we speak.
Yeah. I did an interview last week. Like this plant communication stuff, once upon a time that was just if you play the music for the plants or talk to your plants, maybe it'll work out, right?
Yeah, right.
But now it's plants are communicating with each
science.
other.
This is well-researched science.
Yeah, I interviewed a scientist last week who was talking about how plants that are related to each other, like genetic lineage, help each other out. Whereas, and the example in their study was sunflowers, because it's known, I guess, that if you just plant a bunch of sunflowers, they compete for the soil and they fight real bad. But if you're planting sunflowers that are of the same lineage, seeds from the same plant, they actually start helping each other out and shading the smaller ones from the sun when it's too hot and doing these things. And you get more oil and more sunflower seeds because they're much happier hanging out with their fam,
Yeah,
it's
the
incredible.
level of actual functional intelligence and collaboration going on within natural systems is, again, that's where we've gone wrong, is we think it's mechanical and we're in charge of it. No, it's all interwoven and ecological. Everything is talking to everything else. And if we let that collaboration happen, then the wealth that emerges from that ecosystem is beyond anything that we as stupid two-legged monkey people could create. There is a basic principle of respect and humility that we could learn very well from indigenous people that they've always passed along generation to generation.
It seems a very spiritual practice for you as well to be
out there. I'm getting very abstract here, aren't I?
That's okay.
No, I'm a gardener and I like to grow food. I love growing fruit, but vegetables as well. And in practical terms, I'm learning technical stuff all the time and using science. But there are deeper themes here. That we've ended up talking about today.
You're learning lessons from the practice through the soil.
Yes.
So we've talked about the types of seeds. We've talked about the fertilizer. We've talked about that. The craziest thing for me, not the craziest thing, but the most revolutionary thing that I haven't heard is the lack of digging. You're saying, like the layering the soil. How do you then clear debris? Like what if your lot is a mess? Are you just layering stuff right on that? Doesn't matter what's there.
Have you heard of something called Hugelkultur?
I sure have not.
No. Well, Hugelkultur or mound culture is a thing that evolved in Austria and Switzerland. What you do is you gather up all your dead branches and you make a big pile of them and you mound soil on top and you plant on top. And when you do that, the wood rots. And as it rots, it feeds your crops. And people have been doing this for centuries in Europe. And it's the same principle that we're talking about here. It's not a solution to goutweed. I'm sorry about that. But it is a solution based on not fertilizer, That's not the right word. What you want is soil, to build soil fertility by adding materials that, when they rot down, feed the ecosystem and thereby feed the plants. It's like the edge of what we're learning right now, but it is the big movement in agriculture. It's called regenerative agriculture. So we've gone from organic agriculture to permaculture to self-sustaining landscapes, now to regenerative that uses things like selective grazing, cover crops. But the general idea is you don't disturb the soil, you feed it.
Yeah.
And then
work with the soil.
Work with the soil. You become a servant of the soil. Yeah, this is my phrase for it.
We've had some good phrases here today. Between servant of the soil,
sure have.
And Megan said earlier,
downright abstract.
Megan said earlier, we all have Hobbit potential within us. I'm going to get a T-shirt of that too.
I have a personal connection to Tolkien. I have to tell you this.
Lay it on me.
I was in university back in the 60s, and a good friend of mine talked me into producing a full-length 12-episode radio play of The Hobbit. And I did so. I directed it. We had actors, we had sound effects, and I wrote music to every poem in the book. And somewhere snuggled away, I have a letter from Tolkien.
Really?
Acknowledging the work that I did back then.
That is, what was he charmed with the music and everything?
No, it was a very curt letter. It just said, thank you for informing me. See, because his books had been ripped off by a publisher in the States, and I didn't want to be doing it without being respectful. So I wrote to him and told him I was doing it, and he wrote back to me and acknowledged the project.
Amazing. Tolkien, of course, was known to just stop and stare at flowers and plants for hours and hours on end. So I think he would fit right in.
Walking trees in his books, folks. Yeah. You know, this is pretty crazy. Well, listen, I want to say a little bit more about what's been going on with Food Producers Forum, if
Please
that's
do.
okay.
Absolutely.
Unless you have a call.
No, we got about 10 minutes left. If you do want to call in, we only have a little time left, 722-7111, or you can text 327-8206. But Dan, what has been going on with the Food Producers Forum?
Well, the project that I'm leading, the Provincial Food Network, as I mentioned, is about to become a cooperative. But along the way, we've been working with 4 sites in Labrador and 11 here on the island. And Labrador, the situation with food is really awful. A lot of the food that's being brought in and sold at retail is very high priced, but it's also old food, in some cases returned from supermarkets in Montreal. And the person trying to do something about that is a farmer in Goose Bay. His name is Tom Angiers. He's a 9th generation Canadian farmer. And in a project collaborating with him and the Nunatuavut Council, based in Goose Bay, the council that represents the Inuit of southern Labrador, we recognized that there was a need to deliver healthy food. And so Tom has a cold storage, 3,000 square foot cold storage at his farm in Goose Bay. And he's been trucking in only the best food from the wholesalers in Montreal and Toronto.
Amazing.
And running it down the Labrador coast all the way to the Quebec border in his own truck. But the truck was too small and it had no refrigeration. And so we knew what we really needed for healthy food in Labrador was one big honking truck. Well, we found it.
You found
a
a
25-ton Freightliner with dual refrigeration sitting here in CBS, available to purchase. And we put some money from the project into it, about $11,500. And Tom put in $1,000, and Roxanne Notley at the Nunatuavut was willing to help us with this if she could. And we ended up $39,000 short of the purchase price of the truck. Okay. And so I went scurrying around looking for a funder. And 2 weeks ago, on a Tuesday, I got an email from Susan Cameron at Farm Credit Canada in Saskatoon with the news that the $39,000 would be transferred to our account. We bought the truck, and last Friday, Tom drove it back, and it's at his farm at Spruce Meadow Farms in Goose Bay, Labrador, and he will be having the capability to deliver the best quality food. And I'm not just talking about his own potatoes, because he planted the largest crop in Labrador history last year. He planted 83,000 bedding plants from the provincial transplant program, 10,000 pounds of potato seed, and then seeded an even larger crop as well. And all of that is in his cold storage. But then there's other food that he brings in from Montreal, and not just broccoli and grapes. He brings in dragon fruit and eggplant and hot chili peppers. I've been to his place.
Wow.
That looks better than what I can get at the Sobeys or the Dominion here in St. John's.
That's incredible. Near Happy Valley Goose Bay, you said.
Yeah, so this means that kids in the communities of Labrador will not be getting moldy peppers. They will be getting good
Fresh food.
stuff. And he's looking to solidify his distribution network and get commitments from the communities. But now we've got the truck, and I am so happy about this.
That's incredible. You're going to have to keep us posted on how that goes.
We will
because
indeed.
It's such an important issue for Labrador, food security.
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. And
For all of us, really.
And the food for the North needs to take a step up in quality.
We only got a few minutes left, but you brought in a magazine here. And tell us a bit about that.
Well, the thing that I love, there's my phone going off. Please ignore it.
Oh, that's why we always tell you to be aware of your exits and turn your phones off before you enter the theater, of course. I hope that wasn't your lawyer. In any case,
Okay.
What's going on in the magazine here?
So as I mentioned, Food Producers Forum, foodproducersforum.com is an online encyclopedia of gardening information. But one of the great things is there's some great local, regional, and national magazines out there. And one of them, and I encourage listeners to check it out, because whether you're a home gardener or a small-scale farmer or someone who's dreaming about the farm, Small Farm Canada is a national magazine chock full of practical information. I'm looking at an article about recycling. I'm looking at an article about sheep. I'm looking at an article that lists all of the farms, a seed guide, the seed guide directory.
This is Small Farm Canada.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you can subscribe to it because we need better information.
Right.
We need to learn. This is science,
And information,
and it is
as you said,
technology.
tailored to our biosphere here in the northern
In
climate.
the north, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a lot of practical tips there. And I will be doing a press release about the truck soon, and I'll be writing an article about that story and the story of food in Labrador for Small Farm Canada's next
I can't
issue.
wait to hear about the truck. We do have one question left. Can you please tell me how to get rid of stinging nettles once and for all? I've been trying to kill so much of it in my yard for years, but it keeps coming back. Somebody just texted us that question. So you can't eat the nettles, you said earlier, or you can boil them up.
Of course you can eat them. You harvest the young tips and you make them into soups, and you can dry the leaves and make them into tea. But if you need to get rid of a patch of them, then the best thing is to keep pulling them, and then to perhaps acidify the soil with vinegar. But my advice is don't get rid of them, harvest them.
Just harvest them, use them.
Oh, yeah. And turn them into nettle tea. Put them in buckets of water and turn them into fertilizer. They're awesome.
Okay. So
They're a resource. They're annoying.
Dan's
I know
all
they're
for
annoying,
it.
But they're a valuable resource.
It's a valuable resource. So if you're going to pull them, make sure you wear gloves. But, hey, try some nettle tea. I don't know. Maybe that's great.
I've heard, but I'm not sure, that the sting of the stinging nettles is an antidote for rheumatoid arthritis.
Really?
I can't vouch for that. I don't want to give medical advice. But there is a tradition of using it in that way.
Okay. That's interesting.
Strange.
I'm sure you could test this yourself if you were out walking in the park and just whap your hand off of a stinger nettle. But don't say I didn't tell you to do that. Don't do that.
Nor me.
We only got a couple minutes left. Dan, you were talking a little earlier about some of the workshops that you have coming up. Why don't you tell us what else is going on there?
Well, David Goodyear at the Homestead in Flat Rock has workshops coming up. We will be announcing some foraging workshops at the Mercy Center on Mount Scio. My workshops are taking place April 26th and 27th and May 10th and 11th. I do have about 40 people signed up, but that leaves us with room for about a dozen more. And you would need to email me at info@perfectlyperennial.ca, and I'll put you on the waiting list and let you know if there's space. And that's the workshop I call Creating the Year-Round Garden, which is about we have fun together. We start our seeds. People go home with seeds already planted. We learn how to build raised beds. We do a foraging walk and a garden tour. And then it's just kind of an overload of solid information about garden techniques. I love it because I always learn something new.
Dan Rubin, he is the founding chair of the Food Producers Forum. He is the author of Sun, Seed, and Soil Tips and Techniques for Northern Garden. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Great to meet you, Andrew.
Great to meet you too. And of course, we'll have you back on the show, I'm sure, for a future gardening episode. Tomorrow on the show, I'm back. And we're in the thick of Ramadan for Muslim Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. It's a big one this year. They're getting a brand new home. So we're going to talk to some of the folks over there to see how the party is going. That's tomorrow on The Signal. If you missed this conversation, you can rewatch all the episodes on the CBC Listen app or on our YouTube channel. That's at CBC Newfoundland and Labrador. I hope you have a really good rest of your Tuesday.